Mornings in this city always began the same way, not with light, but with noise. Cars, distant sirens, someone else's footsteps in the hallway, the soft hum of the elevator, like the heartbeat of the building itself. And all of it against the backdrop of her own silence, the silence she had learned to keep inside for years, like a locked room. Eliza stood by the window, holding the curtain with one hand. Outside, between glass and sky, life flowed on. Other people's meetings, other people's decisions, other people's destinies. Her own destiny had once felt foreign, too, as if someone had torn an important page from it and hidden it in their pocket. The kettle whistled in the kitchen, too loud for such a gentle morning. Eliza exhaled and turned off the stove, deliberately avoiding the corner of the table where a small box of bandages and children's vitamins always lay. This was her morning, her rules, her control. "Mom?" The voice from the bedroom was sleepy, slightly hoarse. Eliza froze for half a second, as she always did when she heard it, not because it was weak. On the contrary, it was so alive, so real, that sometimes she felt if she turned away too quickly, the secret would slip out and become visible. "I'm here, sweetheart," she said calmly, though something inside her twitched. Soft, barefoot steps crossed the floor. A little boy appeared in the doorway. He was 4. The age when a child understands more than adults expect, yet is still too small not to feel loneliness. Leo rubbed his eyes with his fists, his hair sticking up at the back of his head like a grumpy kitten's. He wore gray pajamas, the dinosaur print long faded. "You got up early again," he said, with the seriousness of a grown man. "Work is waiting," Eliza said, leaning down to kiss his forehead. "And today you will be my most important assistant." "I'm not an assistant, I'm the director," he replied solemnly, straightening his shoulders. She smiled. With Leo, her smile was almost always real. "Then, director, your first order, breakfast." He climbed onto the chair, swinging his legs. Eliza placed a plate of omelet and berries in front of him. Simple food, simple life, normal. Her own carefully assembled version of normal. "Will you pick me up today?" Leo asked without looking down. There was no whim in his voice, only a quiet test. Who would be there? Who would stay? "Of course," she answered immediately. "I always pick you up." He finally looked at her, long and carefully, so carefully it stole her breath for a moment. Children have a special gaze. They don't see what you say, they see what you hide. "Mom?" He paused, choosing his words. "Do I have a dad?" The question came too calmly, not like a sudden blow, more like something he had been carrying inside for a long time. Something tightened inside Eliza, not pain, fear, the kind of fear she had learned to transform into carefully chosen answers. She slowly sat down across from him, so they were eye to eye. "You have me. That's enough, right?" Leo frowned. "But everyone has a dad, even Mia from my group. She said her dad picks her up in a car, and he has a beard." Eliza pressed her fingers together a little tighter to hide the tremble. A beard, a car. The world draws an image so easily, and then demands explanations. "Sometimes," she chose her words like fragile glass, "sometimes adults can't stay together. That's not the child's fault." "Does he know about me?" The air in the room thickened. Eliza looked at the kettle, the cups, the spice shelf, anywhere but his eyes, and yet she forced herself to look back. She couldn't look away. She was her anchor, her only one. "He," she said, her voice staying level, "he isn't with us, but I am, always." Leo nodded slowly, a child's okay that really means, "I will remember this and come back to it later." "I want to have a dad," he said quietly.
Eliza reached out and covered his hand with hers. "You are my most beloved," she said, instead of answering, "and you will never be alone." He finished his breakfast in silence. Then he became the director again, demanding cartoons, and life tried to return to its usual rhythm. But something inside her had already shifted. When Leo ran back to his room, Eliza picked up her phone. A reminder flashed on the screen. Luxwell Media, contract signing, final approvals. She knew that company too well. Not because she followed business news, but because once a friend had said, "That's his market now, his people, his money, his world." His. She closed her eyes for a second, as if she could erase the word from her mind. 4 years ago, everything had been simpler, more painful, but simpler. Back then, she believed the worst had already happened, that nothing could be worse than that night. She was wrong. The office was cool and smelled of new furniture, as if it had been built solely to impress those who still believed money made people better. Eliza signed documents, listened to the lawyer, nodded, placed her signature, all on autopilot. Her work required precision, and precision was her refuge. Exact wording, exact deadlines, exact rules. Where rules worked, the heart stayed silent. "One last thing," the young manager said, smiling too widely. "An investor will join us today. He personally wanted to be present." Eliza looked up. "An investor?" she asked calmly, though everything inside her went alert. "Yes, he rarely shows up, but you understand, it's an important day." She nodded and lowered her gaze back to the paper. An important day. The kind of words that usually meant something you didn't control was about to happen. The elevator doors opened soundlessly. First, she saw the shoes, expensive, flawless. Then dark trousers without a single crease. Then hands. Only then did her gaze lift higher. The man entered the boardroom with the confidence of someone who believed the air belonged to him. Dark hair, light stubble, sharp features. He didn't smile, not because he was rude, but because he didn't need to be liked. The manager beamed. "Mr. Crow, welcome. We were just finishing—" The name struck her like a gunshot in a closed room. Pro. The blood drained from Eliza's face. She rose slowly from her chair, more by instinct than etiquette. He looked at her, and in that moment, time stopped behaving normally. His gaze slid over her face and stopped, too abruptly, too precisely, as if he wasn't seeing a partner, an employee, a woman in a boardroom, but something from the past he had locked away. Eliza couldn't move. He took a step closer. "Eliza?" he said quietly, almost in disbelief. Her fingers clenched around the pen until her skin turned white. She heard the manager speaking, the lawyer coughing, papers rustling, but none of it mattered. Only one thing did. He was here. Nathan Crow, the man she was never supposed to face again. He studied her as if testing reality, then asked, just as quietly, but with a different tone now, a dangerous one. "Tell me, why did you disappear?" Eliza opened her mouth, but no words came, because the answer was terrifying, because her life now included Leo, and because if Nathan ever found out. Eliza left the boardroom almost at a run, though outwardly it looked like a controlled, steady stride. Her heels barely touched the floor, her back straight, her shoulders squared. She carried herself the way women do who cannot afford to break in front of others. The elevator doors closed, and only then did she allow herself to breathe out. The air trembled in her chest, like after a blow. Her heart was beating too fast, not from fear, from memory, from something that had been buried long ago and had suddenly risen to the surface, alive and dangerous. Nathan. Her mind refused to accept what had just happened. She knew that name. She knew that voice, that look, sharp, attentive, as if it could strip a person down to their very core. He was not supposed to be here. Not today. Not ever. Eliza pressed her forehead against the cold mirror of the elevator and closed her eyes. In her mind, flashes from the past appeared one after another. The night city, rain, his hands gripping the steering wheel, her own voice, trembling but stubborn. "You don't get to decide for me." Back then, she had left, abruptly, almost cruelly, without explanations, without goodbyes. She had convinced herself it was the only way, that it would be better, safer, for everyone. The elevator stopped. Eliza opened her eyes and instantly became composed again. The mask slid back into place, flawless, professional, cold. But inside, everything was burning. She knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. Nathan stayed in the boardroom longer than the others. He stood by the window, looking out at the city spread below, but he wasn't really seeing it. Another image stood before his eyes, a face painfully familiar and at the same time frighteningly distant. Eliza. She had changed. She was calmer, more restrained, more beautiful, with the kind of beauty that comes when a woman has learned how to survive. But something in her remained the same look, the same line of her lips, the same habit of tightening her fingers slightly when she was nervous. He noticed it, and that could only mean one thing. She had recognized him too. "Why did you disappear?" The question lodged in his throat when he finally spoke it aloud. He hadn't expected an answer right away. He had been ready for anger, coldness, even lies, but not for that. The emptiness that flickered in her eyes. Nathan exhaled slowly. His world had always been precise and predictable. He controlled deals, people, money. But now, control was slipping away. He was certain of one thing. Eliza was hiding something, and it wasn't just about the past.
That evening, Eliza picked Leo up from daycare earlier than usual. She noticed the teacher's surprised look, but said nothing. Today, she needed to be with her son, more than ever. Leo ran toward her with a drawing in his hands. "Mom, look! This is you!" he said proudly. On the sheet of paper was a woman with long hair and an enormous heart drawn in her chest. Beside her stood a small figure holding her hand. Eliza crouched down and hugged him tightly. "It's beautiful," she said, swallowing hard. "Thank you." On the way home, Leo talked about his day, about his friends, about how they had argued over who would be the driver in their game. Eliza listened, nodded, smiled, and at the same time caught herself glancing again and again at her son's reflection in the glass. He looked too much like someone else, not like her. Later, when Leo was asleep, Eliza sat beside his bed for a long time, gently stroking his hair. His breathing was even, calm, the way his whole world should be. "I'm sorry," she whispered. She wasn't sure who she was saying it to, her son or the man she had once loved too deeply. Her phone vibrated on the nightstand. An unknown number. The message was short. "Nathan Crow. We need to talk. I know you're hiding something." Eliza closed her eyes, because he was right. And because the most terrifying part wasn't that he had recognized her, it was that one day he might recognize Leo. Eliza didn't reply to the message, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she knew too well. She turned off her phone and placed it face down, as if that could make reality retreat. But the night brought no peace. Sleep came in fragments, short, restless ones. In them, Nathan stood too close, spoke too softly, while Leo called for her from somewhere far away. In the morning, Eliza woke before the alarm. The house lay in half shadow, the light outside only beginning to rise. She sat on the edge of the bed for a long time, listening to the silence, as if checking whether everything was still in place. The silence felt fragile, Her phone vibrated again. This time, the number was familiar. Nathan Crow. The message was shorter than the previous one. Today, after work. No question mark, no request. It read like an order or a promise. Eliza clenched the phone in her hand. He had always written like that, confidently, as if the world was meant to adjust to his rhythm. She got up and went to the nursery. Leo was asleep, his face pressed into the pillow, one arm thrown over the blanket. Eliza adjusted the sheet and lingered for a moment, studying his face. The older he grew, the harder it became to convince herself that the resemblance was only imagination. "It's just a coincidence," she told herself, but her heart didn't believe it.
The workday dragged on, far too slowly. Every email, every call felt unnecessary, out of place. Eliza caught herself checking the time again and again, counting minutes, to the end of the day, to the meeting, to what could no longer be avoided. By evening, she made a decision. Not because she wanted to, because she understood. Running away would no longer work. Nathan was waiting for her at the bar on the top floor of the hotel. Panoramic windows, dim light, the city below, cold and indifferent. He stood by the window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and didn't turn when she approached. "You came," he said, as if he had known the answer in advance. "I won't stay long," Eliza replied calmly. He turned. Their eyes met, and for a moment the air between them grew dense, almost tangible. "You disappeared," Nathan said, "without explanations, without a trace, and now I find you here. Tell me why." "It doesn't matter," Eliza answered, keeping her voice steady. He gave a short, humorless smile. "It matters to me." Nathan stepped closer, not invading, but crossing the familiar boundary. Eliza felt the tension she remembered too well, the kind she had once been unable to resist. "Do you have someone?" he asked suddenly. The question was simple, too simple. "Yes," she said after a brief pause. He nodded, as if noting a fact. "How long?" "Long enough." "And are you happy?" Eliza didn't answer right away, because happiness wasn't a word that fit a life built from compromises and fear. "I'm living," she said at last. Nathan studied her carefully, as if assembling a puzzle from small details. His gaze lingered on her face, her shoulders, her hands. "You've changed," he said, "but you still know how to lie with your eyes." It was too close to the truth. "Why did you want to talk?" Eliza asked, shifting the subject. "If that's all, let's end this." He leaned slightly closer and lowered his voice. "Because I don't believe in coincidences, and because I can feel you hid something bigger than just the past." Something tightened inside her. "Be careful with your conclusions. Sometimes people just leave." "Not you," he replied quietly. "You never leave for no reason." At home, Leo greeted her with a joyful shout and immediately tugged at her hand. "Mom, you promised to read," he reminded her. She smiled and nodded. They settled on the couch, Leo curling against her, his head resting on her shoulder. His trust was absolute, and that made everything even more frightening. As she read, her voice was calm, steady, practiced. Leo listened for a while, then his breathing slowed, deepened. Soon he was asleep, his small fingers still clutching the edge of her sweater. Eliza stayed there long after, afraid to move. Later, when the apartment was dark and silent, she sat alone, not turning on the lights. The city outside shimmered faintly through the windows, distant and unreal. Her phone lit up. A message. Her breath caught the instant she saw the name. Nathan Crow. The words were short, but they struck harder than anything he had said before. "Tell me the truth, Eliza. That child, is he mine?" Eliza closed her eyes, because there were questions you could outrun, and then there were questions that destroyed the ground beneath your feet.
Nathan's message remained unanswered. Eliza didn't type yes, and she didn't type no. She simply placed her phone beside Leo's bed and sat there, staring into the darkness while the night slowly dissolved into the pale gray of dawn. She knew if she answered now, there would be no way back. The past never returns carefully. It comes abruptly, without knocking, and shatters everything you've spent years building, hoping you would never have to look there again. Eliza closed her eyes, and the past returned. Back then, she had been different, braver, younger, more foolish, and happier. Nathan had entered her life suddenly, like a storm, like a challenge, like a danger impossible to ignore. He was confident, hard-edged, incredibly controlled, a man who always knew what he wanted and was used to getting it. Except her. With her, he was different, sometimes sharp, sometimes gentle, sometimes frighteningly silent. He didn't promise forever. He didn't speak grand words, but the way he looked at her made her believe it was enough. She was wrong. The memory rose too clearly. They were sitting in his office, city lights reflected in the glass, rain tapping against the windows. Eliza held a cup in her hands, long since cold, trying to find the right words. "I'm pregnant," she finally said. The silence that followed her words was not the kind in which joy is born. It was heavy, pressing. Nathan remained still for a long time. Too long. "Are you sure?" he finally asked. The question became the first blow. "Yes," she said. "Absolutely." He stood up, paced the room, then stopped by the window. His back was tense, as if he were bracing for a hit he hadn't expected. "This isn't the right time," he said. "You understand what's happening in my life right now." She rose to her feet. "I'm not asking whether it's convenient, Nathan. I'm telling you the truth." He turned to face her. His expression had hardened. "I'm not ready," he said. "I have deals, pressure, responsibility. A child isn't something you can simply fit into a schedule." Something inside Eliza cracked. "You're talking as if this is a project," she said quietly. "I'm talking like this because I'm used to thinking rationally, and you should do the same." That was the second blow. "And what are you suggesting?" she asked. He fell silent. But the silence said everything. A choice, a decision, a refusal. "I can't be a father right now," he said at last, "and I don't want you building illusions." Eliza looked at him and understood. If she stayed, she would break. If she begged, she would lose herself. If she allowed him to decide, she would betray not only herself, but the one who was already inside her. She left that same night, without shouting, without scenes, without a final look. She simply disappeared. She opened her eyes. The room was filled with morning light. Leo was still asleep, calm and trusting. The phone lay beside her. The screen lit up again. A new message. "Nathan Crow. If you're silent, then I'm right." Eliza exhaled slowly. Because the truth he demanded could destroy everything, but the lie she had been living in had already begun to collapse on its own. Eliza didn't answer right away. She stared at the phone screen as if it might explode at the slightest touch. "If you're silent, then I'm right." He had always been like this. He knew how to press, not with shouting, not with threats, but with certainty, as if the truth belonged to him by right of strength. She typed briefly, "We need to talk, but not like this." The reply came almost instantly. "Where?" She sent him her address. After sending the message, Eliza slowly sank onto the couch. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't fight it. Today, she didn't need to look strong. Today, she needed to be honest, at least with herself. Nathan arrived in the evening, without security, without a driver, as if he deliberately wanted to show that this wasn't a deal, not pressure, not a display of power. When she opened the door, they stood looking at each other for several seconds in silence. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Yes." He stepped inside, looked around. The apartment was bright, calm, too ordinary for the woman who had once disappeared from his life. "You've lived here long?" he asked. 4 years, Eliza answered. He nodded, too calmly. "So you didn't leave for a while?" "I left for good," she said, "back then." The familiar, heavy silence settled between them again. "You didn't answer my question, the one I asked yesterday." Eliza took a deep breath. "Because if I answer it," she said, "there will be no way back. There already isn't." She glanced toward the door of the child's room. "There are things you can't undo," she said, "and people you can't protect if the truth comes too early." Nathan followed her gaze. "Who's in there?" he asked. "My son." The words sounded calm, almost ordinary, but inside everything tightened. "Mine," he corrected. Eliza closed her eyes. "Yes."
Leo stepped out of the room, sleepy, clutching a soft toy in his hands. He stopped when he saw the unfamiliar man and pressed himself against the doorframe. "Mom?" he asked quietly. Eliza moved to him at once and took his hand. "It's okay," she said. "This is a friend of mine." Nathan crouched down so they were at eye level. "Hi," he said. "I'm Nathan." Leo studied him carefully, far too carefully. "You look like me," the boy said suddenly. The world tilted. Eliza felt her legs weaken. Nathan rose slowly, the color drained from his face. His gaze moved from the child to Eliza and back again. "How old is he?" he asked very softly. 4. He took a step back. "You said, back then," his voice broke, "you said you were leaving for good." "I left," she answered, "but life went on." He turned away, ran a hand over his face. "You took my choice away," he said at last. "You made your choice first," Eliza replied. "I only accepted it." He spun back toward her. "You had no right." "And you had the right to say a child wasn't the right time?" Her voice trembled for the first time. "You had the right to refuse?" Silence filled the room, broken only by Leo's breathing. "I didn't know whether he would grow up happy with a father who didn't want him," she said more quietly. "But I knew one thing. Without love, I wouldn't give him away." Nathan looked at his son. At his son. "I never said I didn't want him," he said hoarsely. "I said I wasn't ready." "For a child, it's the same thing," Eliza answered. Leo tugged gently at her hand. "Mom, is he my dad?" he asked simply. Eliza froze. Nathan looked at her, for the first time without defense, without control, without certainty. Only fear. "Answer him," he said. Eliza felt her heart tighten, because now it wasn't their story being decided. It was a child's life. The room was too quiet. Eliza looked at Leo and felt time slow down, as if giving her one more second, the last one, before everything changed. "Mom," he repeated, "is he my dad?" She knelt down in front of her son and took his small hands into her own, warm, trusting. "Yes," she said calmly, "he is your dad." The words sounded simple, without drama, without tragedy, but for Nathan it struck harder than any accusation. Leo studied him carefully, as if trying to assemble the image piece by piece. "Will you come again?" he asked. Nathan didn't answer right away. He looked at the child, at his face, at the familiar features, and for the first time in his life he felt, not control,
Not power, but fear of losing something he hadn't even had time to receive. "If your mom allows it," he said at last. Leo nodded, as if it were the most logical answer in the world. Then tomorrow, he decided, and went back to his room as if nothing extraordinary had just happened.
The door closed. Eliza rose slowly. Her heart was pounding so loudly it felt as if Nathan could hear every beat. "You could have told me sooner," he said quietly. "You could have stayed," she replied. He turned away and was silent for a few seconds. "I'm not apologizing for who I was back then," he said, "but I regret not understanding who I could have become." She looked at him for a long moment, without anger, without resentment. "I wasn't waiting for you to be perfect," she said. "I was waiting for you to be there." He nodded. "I can't change the past." "And you don't have to," Eliza said. "I don't want you to come back for me." He lifted his gaze. "For him?" She paused. That was the question she had feared the most. "For him," she said at last, "you need to be honest. Don't come and disappear. Don't promise if you're not sure. He's not a project. He's a person." "I know," Nathan said. "And if you allow it, I won't start as a father. I'll start as a man who needs to learn how to become one." Eliza felt something inside her finally loosen, not pain, but the tension she had carried for too long. "I won't give you guarantees," she said, "but I'll give you a chance."
Time passed. Not days, not weeks, months. Nathan didn't disappear. He arrived on time. He learned to listen. He made mistakes and stayed. Leo grew used to him carefully, with questions, with tests, with smiles that became more confident each time. And Eliza, for the first time in many years, stopped living in defense mode. One evening they were sitting together on the balcony. The city below shimmered with lights. A warm breeze stirred the curtains. "Mom," Leo said, "do I have 2 homes now?" Eliza looked at Nathan. He didn't look away. "Yes," she answered, "and 2 people who love you." Leo smiled and leaned against them. Nathan said quietly, "Thank you for not taking this away from me forever." Eliza didn't answer right away. "Thank you," she said, "for coming back before it was too late." Sometimes love isn't a story about everything working out at once. It's a story about people finding the courage to choose each other when everything could have been lost. The end.